Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really peeling back the layers, looking beyond just behavior. We're
Hmm.
diving into the hidden machinery, the psychological systems that actually create our actions.
Exactly. We're taking all this fascinating research from uh, behavioral economics, relational psychology, even neuroscience, and trying to make it practical, like a blueprint for how you actually function.
Yeah, a blueprint. And the mission today really is clarity. It's about building a toolkit.
A toolkit for self-awareness, definitely, and also for navigating the social world more effectively. We're pulling back the curtain on habits, relationships, perception,
Hmm.
the stuff that secretly runs the show.
Right. If you've ever felt like something else is pulling the strings, or maybe you keep hitting the same walls despite your best intentions,
Hmm.
then this deep dive is absolutely for you. We want to get past the surface stuff and look at the predictable motivations underneath.
So where should we start? The architecture of action seems like a good place.
Let's do it. Section 1, the blueprint of action. Habits, identity, and how we can actually design our behavior. We all know the feeling, right? Setting these huge goals like, I'm going to be super productive or read way more books this year.
Oh, definitely. The classic New Year's resolution trap.
Exactly. And the research is so clear on why they often fail, they're just too vague. There's no instruction manual included.
That's where the specificity principle comes in. It's fundamental in behavior design, like James Clear talks about. The first law, make it obvious. Your brain needs a cue, a specific trigger. Without that cue, a location, a time, maybe an event, that habit you want to build is just floating around. Never really lands.
Okay, so unpack that mechanism. How specific does it need to be? Is saying, I'll read at 7 p.m. enough? Or does it need more?
It really needs extreme specificity. Think about it. Habits are automatic responses. They fire off a prediction. The best way to bypass needing willpower is using an implementation intention. There's a formula for it.
Right, the I will behavior at time and location formula.
Precisely. So not just I'll read at 7 p.m., but I will read for 20 minutes at 7 p.m. in the armchair in the living room. See? Suddenly, there's no debate. The time and place become the trigger. The chance of actually doing it goes way up.
So you're essentially outsourcing the decision to the environment, letting the context do the heavy lifting instead of relying on conscious effort every single time.
Exactly. You're automating the starting process. And that's why habit stacking is so effective too.
Ah, yes. Linking a new habit to one that's already locked in.
Mm-hmm. You leverage the momentum of something you already do automatically. You don't need a new reminder system. You just tack the new habit onto the end of an existing one. Like, after I pour my morning coffee, that's the current habit, I will think of one thing I'm grateful for that's the new habit.
So the old habit's neural pathway kind of carries the new one along for the ride.
You got it. The established pathway makes it easier for the new behavior to take root. You're making your subconscious an ally.
Which is crucial because, let's face it, the subconscious runs most of the day. Our systems and conditioning really matter, but what about the flip side? Getting rid of the bad habits that feel just as automatic.
Okay, so now we use the inverse principle. Make it unattractive. This is where we often get tripped up. We think the problem is the craving itself, the cigarette, the endless scrolling, the sugary snack. But that's just the surface.
There's a deeper motive underneath.
Always. Every behavior, good or bad, taps into some fundamental human drive. Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, conserving energy, fitting in, gaining status. Things like that.
So the habit isn't the real issue, it's the prediction your brain makes right before it. The prediction of relief or reward.
Exactly. The brain predicts a positive outcome. You get a little dopamine hit just from the anticipation, and boom, you're chasing the behavior.
Hmm.
To break that, you need to consciously interrupt that prediction. You have to highlight the benefits of avoiding the bad habit. Make avoidance feel good right now.
How does that work in practice? Give me an example.
Okay, so instead of the thought, if I eat this cookie, I'll feel comforted, you actively reframe it. You might think, if I don't eat this cookie, I'm proving I'm in control of my health, and that feels good immediately. You're focusing on the immediate reward of sticking to your values or identity, not just the distant negative consequence. You make the cost of the habit feel immediate and unattractive.
That's a really interesting mental shift. And for those habits we want to do but kind of dread, there's a way to make them more attractive too, right? The motivation ritual.
Yes, this is a clever one. You pair something you genuinely enjoy immediately before doing the difficult habit. Let's say you hate doing your expenses, but you love listening to a specific podcast. The rule becomes you only get to listen to that podcast while you're gathering your receipts and getting ready to do the expenses.
So the positive feeling from the enjoyable activity starts to bleed over, making the anticipation of the difficult task a little less dreadful.
Precisely. It's conditioning yourself, using that reward system to your advantage.
Yeah.
You associate the difficult task with something pleasant.
It's smart behavioral design. But you mentioned something earlier that even the best design can fail if the underlying identity isn't aligned.
This is huge. We're moving beyond just actions now into who you believe you are. Because the core truth is, lasting change requires an identity shift. You act in ways that are congruent with your self-concept.
So if I want to start exercising regularly, but deep down I still see myself as someone who isn't athletic or someone who hates gyms.
Then the first time you skip a workout, or it feels really hard, that core identity kicks in. See, I told you, this isn't really you. The setback becomes proof you're not that kind of person.
Whereas if you've started to cultivate the identity of I am someone who shows up or I am a disciplined person,
Then that same tough workout or missed day is just data, a temporary blip. It doesn't threaten your core identity. Your actions are aimed at reinforcing who you believe you are, not just achieving an external goal.
that connects really well with Alfred Adler's ideas, doesn't it? His concept of the style of life.
Absolutely. Adler saw the self as striving towards a unique, often unconscious goal. Maybe superiority, maybe completion, maybe avoiding inadequacy. And everything, our thoughts, feelings, even physical symptoms, gets organized around serving that underlying style of life.
So my conscious goal might be, say, career success. But if my underlying style of life is driven by a fear of failure,
Then your psychological system might subtly sabotage you. You might avoid risks, procrastinate on big projects, find reasons why opportunities aren't quite right. The system prioritizes maintaining that core style of life, avoiding failure over achieving the conscious goal.
wow. So the style of life is like the hidden operating system. To change the output consistently, you need to tweak the code itself.
You've nailed it. And this is why self-affirmation, when tied to action, is so critical. It helps rewrite that code.
How do we make that practical, though? Identity feels so abstract.
You bring it down to the concrete. You create an I am the kind of person who statement. Something simple like I am the kind of person who finishes what they start.
Hmm.
And then this is keys, Bettersh. You link that identity to a tiny, almost effortless daily action that proves it. Maybe it's just writing one sentence for your project each day, or putting your workout clothes out the night before.
So it's not about grand gestures, but about collecting small pieces of evidence.
Exactly. Every time you do that tiny action, you're making a deposit in the bank account of that new identity. You're reinforcing it bit by bit, building that new style of life through small, consistent proof.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've looked inward at habits and identity. Now let's look outward at how we navigate the social world. Attachment styles seem crucial here.
Oh, absolutely. Attachment theory gives us such a powerful lens for understanding why we act the way we do in relationships. It's like the blueprint for our relational software.
And one style that often causes a lot of confusion and pain is the avoidance style.
Yes, let's tackle that one. The key insight, which is really counterintuitive for partners, is this. An avoidant person often pushes intimacy away, not because they don't care or aren't interested.
But because intimacy is actually increasing.
Exactly. That feeling of closeness, of vulnerability, maybe perceived dependency, it triggers their attachment system in a specific way. It signals danger, in a sense.
Danger. That seems extreme.
Well, danger to their sense of autonomy or self-sufficiency, which is paramount for them. So their system executes what researchers call a deactivating strategy. They need to create distance to feel safe again.
Okay, so what do these deactivating strategies actually look like? It's not always obvious, right?
Not at all. They can be quite subtle, often unconscious. Suddenly, the avoidant person might start focusing intently on their partner's flaws. Tiny things, the way they chew, a particular phrase they use, maybe their taste in music.
And they blow these things out of proportion.
They magnify them. This internal focus on the negative creates a kind of mental distance. It's like, see, this person isn't right for me anyway. It justifies the need for space and dampens those uncomfortable feelings of closeness. Other strategies might be withdrawing, shutting down communication, focusing excessively on work, or even flirting with others.
That sounds incredibly painful for the partner who just feels suddenly criticized or pushed away, often when things seem to be going well.
It's devastating. And it perfectly sets up the dynamic often called the anxious avoidant trap or dance.
Ah, the push-pull cycle.
Right. The partner, who might lean more anxious, perceives the distancing or criticism as a threat to the connection. Their attachment system activates. They try to close the gap maybe by seeking reassurance, texting more, initiating intense conversations.
Which, from the avoidant person's perspective,
Feels like engulfment. It confirms their fear of losing autonomy. So they double down on the deactivating strategies, more distance, more withdrawal, maybe even ending the relationship abruptly.
and round it goes.
Yeah.
The anxious person pursues, the avoidant person retreats, and both feel increasingly insecure and misunderstood. It's a really tough pattern.
It truly is. It burns a lot of emotional energy. Now, contrast that with someone who has a secure attachment style.
They operate differently.
Fundamentally, they generally feel safe in relationships. They don't need constant negotiation about intimacy levels. They aren't hypersensitive to perceived rejection. They can communicate their needs clearly and directly.
And they have this underlying sense that, that connection is reliable.
Yeah, and that their partner's well-being is intertwined with their own, but not their sole responsibility. There's a balance. The secure base frees both people up. They don't have to pour all their energy into just managing the relationship's stability. They can focus on living their lives, being authentic.
That sounds like the ideal, but even secure relationships face conflict, right?
No, absolutely. Conflict is inevitable. It's part of being human. The research, particularly from John Gottman, offers a really helpful reframe here. Conflict isn't failure, it's data.
Data, how so?
It tells you where the friction points are, where needs aren't being met, where understanding has broken down. If handled well, conflict actually increases trust and intimacy. Handled poorly, well, it corrodes respect.
Gottman's work identified some key rules for making conflict constructive, didn't he?
He did. 3 really crucial ones. First, attack the problem, never the person's character. Focus on the issue, not on labeling your partner.
Okay, that makes sense. What's second?
Second, agree on a concrete next experiment. Something specific and measurable you can both try for a defined period, like 2 weeks. It makes the solution feel less overwhelming and more like a shared project.
Like, let's try putting our phones away during dinner for the next week.
Exactly. And the third rule is perhaps the most powerful and often the hardest.
Which is?
Before you jump in with your own perspective or defense, you must summarize your partner's point of view to their satisfaction.
Wow. Okay, so what I hear you saying is, and they have to agree that you got it right.
Yes. It forces you to truly listen and demonstrates that you're trying to understand, not just win the argument. When someone feels genuinely heard, their defensiveness drops dramatically. It shifts the whole dynamic.
From adversaries to collaborators trying to solve a shared problem.
Precisely. And that same principle applies when communicating needs. You mentioned earlier that stating a need assertively comes across better than hinting or being demanding.
Right. It feels vulnerable, but actually projects confidence.
It does. If you try to hide a need, say for more quality time, you might become passive-aggressive or critical, which feels needy and pushes your partner away. But if you state it clearly and assertively, hey, I realized I feel more connected when we have dedicated time without distractions. Can we schedule that once a week?
You're showing self-awareness. You're giving your partner clear information to work with, which is actually empowering for both of you.
It removes the guesswork and potential for misinterpretation.
Exactly. Now, speaking of misinterpretation and destructive patterns, we have to talk about Gottman's concept of the harsh startup. The statistics on this are terrifying, aren't they?
They really are. A conversation that begins with criticism or contempt, the harsh startup, is statistically doomed. Gottman found it predicts relationship failure with something like 96% accuracy.
96%, even if you try to smooth things over later.
Even then, the first few minutes set the tone. If it starts harsh, the listener's body goes into fight or flight. They shut down physiologically. The conversation is essentially over before it begins.
And harsh doesn't just mean yelling, right? It can be subtle.
Absolutely. It can be a quiet tone of voice, delivering a character assassination. Like saying calmly, the issue isn't forgetting to take out the trash. It's that you're just fundamentally inconsiderate.
Ouch. Attacking the person, not the behavior.
Exactly. That's the core of the harsh startup. It immediately puts the other person on the defensive, and rational problem solving becomes impossible.
So we need concrete tools to avoid that. Actionable scripts for bringing up difficult topics safely.
Yes. A good framework focuses purely on observable behavior and your own feelings, never on judgment or character. It goes something like this. When X happens, describe the specific observable behavior like, when the dishes are left in the sink overnight, I feel Y state your emotion, like I feel frustrated or I feel unsupported. I need Z state the specific positive action you need, Like, I need us to agree on who does the dishes each night.
Okay, behavior, feeling, need, and then add that experimental piece.
Right. Add the collaborative proposal. Can we try A, the proposed solution, like alternating nights for the next 2 weeks, and then check in on specific date to see how it's working?
That takes the pressure off, makes it feel less like a permanent accusation and more like a temporary experiment we're doing together.
Precisely. It keeps the focus on finding a workable solution, not assigning blame. It's about building safety and communication.
Okay, this is fascinating. We've covered internal habits and external relationships. Now, let's dive into the mind itself specifically. How rational we think we are versus the reality. Cognitive biases and environmental control.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting and maybe a bit unsettling. We like to believe we're logical decision makers, but behavioral economics research, particularly from people like Dan O'Reilly, paints a very different picture.
Our rationality is more fragile than we think.
Much more. Take the concept of anchoring. Our decisions are incredibly influenced by arbitrary, often irrelevant initial pieces of information.
Anchors, like a boat anchor.
Sort of, yeah. It anchors your perception. Airly did experiments where people were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number, a totally random number for this context. Then they were asked to bid on items like wine or chocolate. Those with higher SSN digits consistently bid significantly more money.
Just because they wrote down a higher random number first.
Yep. That random number acted as an unconscious anchor, setting a baseline for their perception of value, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with the item itself.
That's deeply weird. It implies that what we're willing to pay for things, the demand in the market, might often be shaped by memory or these random anchors rather than, how much we actually like the thing.
It suggests our preferences are often constructed on the fly, influenced by context, rather than being stable, internal values we simply consult. We think we know why we chose something, but the anchor might be doing the real work.
And this extends beyond just buying stuff, right? It affects our moral compass, too.
It seems so. Look at the experiments on cheating. People were given tasks where they could dishonestly report their scores to earn more money.
Okay, some level of cheating probably happened?
Yes, a certain amount. But here's the twist. In another condition, instead of earning cash directly, they earned tokens, which they could then exchange for cash a few steps later.
And what happened with the tokens?
Cheating went way up, like more than doubled.
Just because it was tokens first, not direct cash? Why?
The psychological distance. Cheating for tokens feels less like stealing money. It provides a little mental buffer, allowing people to bend the rules more while still, sort of, maintaining their self-image as an honest person. It's easier to rationalize.
Wow, that slight abstraction makes a huge difference in behavior. Okay, so if our internal compass is that easily swayed, what about external forces, things pushing us from the outside?
Huge influence there, too. Take the principle of reciprocation. This is one of the most powerful social rules we have.
The feeling that you have to return a favor?
Exactly. It's deeply ingrained. If someone does something for you, even something small and unsolicited, you feel this strong obligation to repay them. Studies show if someone gives you a small gift, like a free can of soda, you become significantly more likely, like twice as likely to agree to a later request from them, even if it's totally unrelated, like buying raffle tickets.
The sense of indebtedness is automatic.
Almost mechanical. It's a compliance trigger. And we see a similar automatic response when it comes to authority.
Deferring to experts or people in charge.
Yes, especially in strong hierarchies. Think about medicine or aviation. There's a powerful, often necessary tradition of automatic obedience to the person with the recognized authority. The doctor, the pilot.
People tend not to question the MD's orders, even if something seems off.
Often, yes. The difference to perceived expertise can sometimes override even common sense or direct observation. It's not always conscious critical thinking. It's often a deeply ingrained response to the symbols of authority.
Okay, so we've got internal biases and external social rules influencing us. But then there's the bigger picture of environmental control. This brings us to people like B.F. Skinner.
Right. Skinner took a pretty radical stance with behavioral determinism. His argument basically is that true self-reliance is an illusion. We're always necessarily dependent on our environment, the culture, the institutions, the people who taught us, because it's the environment that shapes and maintains our behavior through consequences, through reinforcement.
So feelings like freedom or dignity or loyalty, Skinner would say these aren't internal causes of our actions.
No. He'd say they are labels we attach to the internal states that result from the environment successfully arranging consequences to produce certain behaviors. Loving your country, for example, is just a label for the pattern of behavior, paying taxes, defending borders that the government and culture have successfully reinforced.
The environment is constantly pulling the strings through rewards and punishments, whether we realize it or not.
That was his core argument. And the power of that external environment can be incredibly disruptive to our internal state, as Pavlov's later work showed quite dramatically.
You mean beyond just conditioning dogs to salivate?
Yeah. He found that if a dog had a very strong conditioned reflex and then was subjected to a sudden, extremely powerful extra stimulus like a loud noise or a physical shock, sometimes even a flood in the lab,
What happened to the conditioned reflex?
it could be completely wiped out, a total inhibition to the established response. But more than that, the disruption to the dog's central nervous system could last for days, even weeks.
Days. How would that show up?
Profound changes in behavior, lethargy, anxiety, inability to perform tasks they knew perfectly well before. It showed just how fragile the cortex, the higher brain functions, could be in the face of overwhelming environmental stress. The system essentially crashed.
That fragility really highlights the potential power of the situation itself, which leads us directly to Zimbardo's work.
Exactly. The Stanford prison experiment and later analyses of events like Abu Ghraib point to this chilling interplay between systems, situations, and individuals.
It's not just bad apples, it's the bad barrel or even the bad barrel makers.
That's Zimbardo's argument. Bad systems create bad situations, which then create pressures or roles that can compel even good people towards bad behavior. The power of the situation, the role, can override individual personality and values.
And the evidence for that was how the guards in the experiment started acting.
Yes, they became deeply immersed in their roles. Zimbardo noted that even in their private conversations, they stopped talking about their normal lives, girlfriends, studies, and only obsessed about prison matters, problem prisoners. Their assigned role literally started to consume their personal identity within that context. The situation dictated the behavior.
Wow, okay. Facing how much we're shaped by habits, biases, and the environment can feel a bit deterministic. So it's really helpful to turn towards models of healing and internal regulation, like the internal family systems model, IFS.
Yes, IFS offers such a compassionate and empowering way to understand our inner world. The core idea is that we're made up of various parts or subpersonalities, and crucially, no part is inherently bad,
Even the parts we don't like the inner critic.
especially those parts. IFS sees them as having taken on protective roles, often due to past experiences, stress, or trauma. They're trying to help, even if their methods are causing problems now.
So the inner critic isn't just mean, it's a type of part called a manager.
Exactly. Managers try to control our lives, our appearance, our performance, our relationships, to keep us safe and functioning. The inner critic, for example, might attack us before someone else can, hoping to preempt external criticism or failure.
And what are the managers trying to protect us from?
They're trying to protect the exiles. These are the younger, more vulnerable parts of us that hold the intense emotions from past hurts feelings like shame, fear, loneliness, worthlessness. These feelings felt overwhelming back then, so they got locked away, exiled internally.
So the manager's job, like the inner critic, is basically to keep those exiles safely locked in the basement so those overwhelming feelings don't get triggered and flood the system.
That's a great way to put it. They're managing the system to prevent the exile's pain from surfacing. The goal of IFS isn't to get rid of managers, but to understand their positive intent and help them relax so we can access the true self.
The self with a capital S, what is that in IFS terms?
The self is our core consciousness. It's inherently calm, curious, compassionate, confident, creative, clear, courageous, and connected. These are often called the 8 C's of self-energy.
So healing involves accessing more of that self-energy.
Yes. When we can approach our parts, even the critical or anxious ones, from a place of self, with genuine curiosity instead of judgment, the parts start to feel safe enough to reveal their stories and burdens. They can begin to trust the self to lead.
And that concept of compassion you mentioned, one of the 8 C's, it's not just feeling bad for yourself.
Not at all. In IFS, compassion is the ability to be present with your own painful emotions, with those exiles, without getting overwhelmed or merging with them. It's holding space for your own pain from a place of self. And when you can do that for yourself, you naturally have more capacity to be compassionately present with others' pain without getting sucked in.
That resonates strongly with the research on self-compassion, particularly how it relates to accountability. There's often a fear that being kind to yourself means letting yourself off the hook.
Right. But the evidence points in the opposite direction. Self-compassion, which typically involves kindness towards oneself, Recognizing your struggles as part of the common human experience and mindful awareness of your pain actually increases personal accountability
How does that work? Why would being kinder to myself make me more likely to admit I messed up?
because it reduces the paralyzing effect of shame. Shame makes us want to hide, deny, or blame others. It feels annihilating. Self-compassion creates psychological safety. If making a mistake doesn't trigger an internal shame spiral, I am bad, but rather a self-compassionate response, I did something wrong, that feels bad, but mistakes are human,
Hmm.
you have the internal space to actually own the mistake.
So you're less defensive.
Much less.
Yeah.
You can look at the mistake honestly, apologize sincerely if needed, and commit to doing better precisely because the mistake hasn't fundamentally damaged your sense of self-worth. It fosters learning and growth, unlike shame, which just shuts us down. Self-esteem boosting, ironically, can sometimes lead to more denial to protect the ego.
That distinction between self-compassion and self-esteem is really important. Okay, so we have these psychological models like IFS and self-compassion. But you mentioned trauma often requires going deeper into the body itself.
Yes, this is where understanding the physiology becomes crucial, especially through frameworks like polyvagal theory, developed by Stephen Porges. The core idea is that trauma symptoms, anxiety, hypervigilance, dissociation, numbness are ultimately physiological states rooted in the nervous system.
They're not just thoughts or feelings, but how our body is responding.
Exactly. Healing, therefore, often involves shifting focus from just talking about the trauma to engaging with the physical sensations associated with it.
And this relates to the idea of trapped energy.
Precisely. Trauma often occurs when our innate biological defense responses, fight or flight, are thwarted or overwhelmed. We couldn't fight back, couldn't escape. That massive survival energy gets frozen in the nervous system. Healing often involves allowing the body to finally complete those thwarted responses, discharging that trapped energy.
What does that discharge look like?
It can manifest in many ways, often involuntary. Trembling, shaking, sudden tears, deep breaths or sighs, maybe waves of heat or cold. It's the body processing and releasing that pent-up survival energy, sometimes long after the actual threat is gone. It allows the nervous system to come back into regulation.
And polyvagal theory helps explain the neurological pathways involved in this regulation and dysregulation.
Yes. It highlights the vagus nerve, particularly the difference between the older, unmyelinated vagus associated with the freeze or shutdown response and the newer, myelinated vagus unique to mammals.
The myelinated vagus is the key to feeling safe and connected.
It forms the core of the social engagement system. When this system is active, it actually calms the heart rate, dampens the fight or flight response, and allows us to feel safe enough to connect with others, communicate effectively, and relax. Porges calls it the vagal brake.
So our early life experiences, especially attachment relationships, literally shape how well this vagal brake develops and functions.
Absolutely. Consistent, attuned caregiving helps strengthen the tone and flexibility of this vagal brake. Conversely, early trauma, neglect, or chronic misattunement can lead to a less efficient social engagement system.
Meaning someone might be more easily tipped into fight or flight or collapse into freeze or shut down.
Exactly. Their nervous system might have a smaller window of tolerance. Their physiological hardware for emotional regulation hasn't been optimally developed, making self-soothing and co-regulation with others more challenging. Healing often involves practices that have retuned and strengthened this vagal system.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. From the tiny mechanics of habit formation, through the complex dances of attachment, the illusions of our own rationality, and finally into the deep physiological roots of trauma and healing.
It really paints a picture of how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? The internal and external systems constantly interacting.
I think the central theme, the big takeaway, is the power that comes from seeing these systems clearly. When we stop looking at behavior, our own or someone else's, as purely a matter of character or willpower,
And instead, recognize the predictable psychological and physiological mechanisms underneath.
we gain so much more understanding and potentially agency.
Right. Suddenly, the avoidant partner's withdrawal isn't just rejection. It's a predictable response to perceived closeness overload. The impulse buy wasn't just weak willpower. It might have been triggered by an unconscious anchor. That burst of anger might be an IFS manager part, trying desperately to protect a vulnerable exile.
Seeing the system brings clarity. It moves us away from judgment and towards understanding, maybe even compassion.
Which leads us perfectly into our final thought for today. It connects all these ideas about perception, conditioning, and identity. Oliver Sacks, the neurologist, wrote beautifully about how the self isn't static. It's a narrative, a biography that we are constantly constructing and reconstructing through memory and perception.
A continuous inner story. But if, as we've discussed, our perception is riddled with biases like anchoring, and our behavior is heavily shaped by external conditioning from our environment, as Skinner and Pavlov showed,
Then who is actually writing that story? How much of our narrative is truly our own, and how much is just the playback of unconscious conditioning and external influences?
that's the provocative challenge, isn't it? Given everything we've explored today about these hidden systems, the task for you, the listener, becomes one of conscious authorship.
If your memory filters based on anchors and your environment shapes your responses, you can't just passively let your biography be written. You have to actively engage. You have to choose intentionally what experiences, what actions, what identities you want to recollect, reinforce, and build your narrative around.
The challenge is to become the conscious editor of your own story, using the awareness of these systems not as an excuse, but as a map for intentional living.
Well said. Taking the reins of the narrative, informed by clarity about the underlying machinery.